Felicia, absolutely brilliant. Please do stay here. Fabulous. Thank you so much. You did an absolutely incredible job. I mean, wow. First of all, I can't wait to visit. Just incredible. And I think a real reminder that sustainability isn't just about the planet, but it's very much about people too. And I love that education programme. I mean, the power of that, of the younger generation then coming home and talking to their parents is incredible. So now we're going to go deeper into the connections between climate, conservation and gender equity. And Felicia's going to stay for the panel here. And why the future of our industry and indeed our planet depends on really getting this right. It's a massive topic. Moderating this conversation is Holly Tuppen, a sustainable travel expert, a writer who's spent over 20 years helping brands and travellers leave a lighter, more meaningful footprint. So, Holly, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jo, and thanks so much, Alexandra and everyone else for organising today. What an amazing room. It feels such a privilege to be here. And thank you, Felicia, for that introduction. It's an amazing project, and I'm really glad you're sticking around for the panel. So we're going to cover just the tiny little, very straightforward topic of climate and gender in 45 minutes. So I'm hoping that for everyone in the room, including myself, this is really just the start, and I hope that we can all kind of take this conversation and keep expanding on it. And we're going to do our best as the panel to really expand on what we've already heard today, because there's been so much insight that I think we all just need to keep building on it. So I will welcome up the panel that's going to help me do that. So first of all, we've got Sally from Travalyst. Sally, do you want to come up? We've got
That's amazing.
Rachel from MarAlliance, come on up. And we've got Henrik from the HX Foundation. Thanks so much. So why we're talking about climate and gender and why this is a really important topic. I don't know if you're all familiar with the Project Drawdown, which essentially ranks climate solutions that we need to tackle climate crisis. And female empowerment is really high up that list. And Project Drawdown, which I thought was quite a nice quote, describes women as problem solvers that are central to the world's urgent task to draw down carbon. And that we need women to be represented in all levels of decision making. And that's something that I hope we're going to touch on in the diversity that we've got in this panel today. So to kick things off, I'd love it if each of you could tell us, the audience, a little bit about where your organisation, your business and what you do. And then if you could also just tell us from your perspective, what is the relationship between climate and gender? What does that mean to you?
All right.
Go for it, Sally.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. Yes, I'm Sally. I'm the Chief Executive at Travalyst, which is an independent not-for-profit that was founded about 5 or 6 years ago by Prince Harry with the goal of bringing sustainable travel to the mainstream. So we've convened a big coalition of some of the biggest names in travel and technology. It's a $3 trillion coalition. And the result of that is now if you go and book a flight, you can't do so anywhere in the world without seeing our emissions data. And that's what we're really trying to do, is collect consistent data and get it out there into the mainstream. So how do all these issues interconnect? Well, we're talking about systems change, right? None of these issues are in isolation. And if we want to address any of them, we have to address them together. And so Travalyst was developed with a theory of change that very much is centered on looking at the big picture, but also then diving down into the details of, where is the missing piece of the puzzle, which for us was very much around data, collecting data equitably at scale, getting it into the mainstream so that we can help provide insights and understanding of how we're doing on our journey. On gender in particular, I think there are two really important framing points here. We will not be successful in our fight against climate change or in addressing biodiversity and conservation issues without gender equity and without diversity. It's just impossible for so many reasons. On one hand, as you said, and we know through so much research, women and marginalised communities hold so much knowledge, as has just been wonderfully described. And without that knowledge, we're not going to be able to address those systems levels issues. So we would be missing essentially one of the best tools in our toolkit to actually address these major global and intergenerational issues. The other reason, which I would say is probably the most important and urgent one, is that women suffer more from the impacts of climate change than anybody. Women are 14 times more likely to die in climate disasters. 14 times. Just let that number settle. And that's before you get into all of the other impacts of how climate impacts everything from food scarcity, which women bear the burden of health issues, education being forced increasingly into early marriages when crops are failing and money isn't coming through the door. So these issues are completely interconnected. So we have to think globally at the systems level in an inclusive way. And if we do that, we do have every chance of addressing those systems issues.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sally. Right, Rachel, who we think might be the only climate scientist in the room. We're very privileged to have you here. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what MarAlliance does and yeah, what's your take on what we're talking about today, on the link between gender and conservation in particular?
Absolutely. So I'm Rachel Graham, and I'm the founder and executive director of MarAlliance, which is an international non-profit or non-governmental organization. Actually, we specialize in sharks. And sharks are wonderful flagship species for climate change, and also the state of our coasts, the state of our seas, and more. And one of the things that we specialize in is working with coastal communities, and in particular, fishermen, because they're at the front lines, them and their families. They're at the front lines of how our fisheries and fish are going to fare. And so we work in multiple countries: Cape Verde, Panama, Honduras, Mexico, Belize, and more. And one of the reasons I think I'm here, apart from talking about climate change and gender, is also because these are all countries that are really sought after for tourism. And tourism is actually one of the economic alternatives that is so often proffered to coastal communities and fishermen. Our fish and fisheries are declining rather dramatically, and so coastal communities are looking for alternatives. And in that, their families, of course, many girls, women, are actually moving into travel, tourism industry, and also the work that we do, which is that monitoring science that helps us understand what the state of fish and fisheries is. So we really work at democratizing science so that the communities, the policymakers, marine protected area managers, and more are able to know exactly how do we proceed, how do we manage our stocks, and more. And through that, through horizontal information sharing and more, we have found that our ranks have grown tremendously with young women in all of these countries we're working in. So we're building the local capacities, we're democratizing the science, and we're shifting attitudes, especially for sharks, because sharks are close to my heart, and they're incredibly important for tourism. They're generating absolutely millions of dollars, and what you're seeing is that actually a very large proportion of shark scientists and conservationists are now women throughout the world, not just from the States, not just from Europe, but from all the countries where you're seeing the greatest diversity and the greatest opportunity to develop shark tourism and conservation.
Brilliant, thanks Rachel. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about the women in leadership roles and how important that is for the climate movement. Henrik, thank you so much for being here. When Alessandra put you a little bit last minute on the panel, I was like, no, we don't need a man, please. But from just our initial chats, I am absolutely delighted you are here. So do you want to introduce yourself? And yeah, from your perspective, what's the link between your work in sustainability and gender?
Thank you, Ollie, and hi everyone. I'm Henrik. I'm the Managing Director of HX Foundation, and I'm also a strategic sustainability lead at HX Expeditions, which is an expedition cruise ship company. We sail to the Arctic and Antarctic and Galapagos and everywhere in between, really, to some of the most remote places on Earth. And you know, to really start from the top, I mean, the climate and biodiversity are the key challenge that we are facing. And to then have that discussion and not include women and marginalized gender in that, I mean, we're not going to solve this crisis with the same 50% that created this crisis, right? And more importantly, it's not only unjust, it's incredibly ineffective to do it in that way, right? And another thing that from us, is, operating in some of the most remote places on Earth, what we are really seeing is that in many places and communities we see the same pattern, a pattern that Felicia touched on earlier, and that we've supported MarAlliance. Women are the ones holding these communities together. And they're the ones organizing, they're the ones educating, and they're the ones leading at the local level. So, I mean, it's a division of roles, yes, but women are the backbones of resilience. That's, for me, climate conservation and gender equity are not different things. They're not separate issues, right? They're incredibly deeply intertwined. So I don't think we should talk about one without talking about the other.
Yeah, agree. Thank you, Henrik. That's brilliant. And I think it goes back to what Sally was saying about that systems change, isn't it? It's like we can't really have one without the other. Felicia, thank you so much for your presentation earlier. It's incredibly inspiring what you do on a daily basis. Perhaps you could talk a bit to that as well. I think what we saw from your presentation is not only are you empowering women to go out and protect really critically important wildlife on their doorstep, but also by doing that, you manage to give back to the community at the same time. And there's an amazing stat, and I can't remember it, and I'm going to find it and hopefully share it with everyone. But it's around kind of like if you give kind of like $5 to a man in a community, then they'll spend it on how they like advance their own career. Whereas if you give the $5 to a woman, then they will immediately spend it on education or a more resilient food source or better transportation to the nearest well or whatever it is. Which I think is sadly maybe true. So Felicia, could you tell us a little bit about, in your work, what is the link between the conservation work that you do and empowering females within your community, empowering women?
Back to the question of climate and conservation.
Yeah.
Okay, I've read something. I see that climate conservation and gender equality are all connected. You cannot protect nature without also empowering the people who live closest to it when women are given equal opportunities in conservation and resource management. All communities become stronger and more resilient to climate change. That is why the Black Mambas are working hands in hands with the community, because the project is all about women empowerment.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, the resilience point again. So I think it would be great to kind of like, now we understand the links between climate and gender, it would be great to understand kind of why it's really important to proactively kind of create solutions that link those two things to doing. And when we do connect gender and climate and conservation in our work, what are some of the outcomes? What's some of the magic that happens? So Felicia, perhaps we could start with you, because I think the Black Mambas are a great example of that. What happens, what are the outcomes when you link climate and gender or female empowerment?
Life is created by both men and women equally, with women using more resources and sustainable. This life outcome are we excluded from managing those resources and playing role in decision making. When women are included, decision making is more balanced and in favor of all without bias.
Amazing, thank you for that. And Rachel, does that kind of resonate with you? I know your, fisher communities around the world are often quite male dominated, but in your experience, what happens when you really bring kind of women into the conversation, or how does your work touch upon talking to women within communities?
Well, it's been such an incredibly interesting dynamic to be a woman working primarily in a male sector. And after the initial kind of suspicion that fishers have, and then of course the women folk, is she really a woman? And after I was pregnant with my first child, and then they were like, oh, she is a woman. This is good, okay. Literally kind of that mindset change. But what has been really, really interesting is then seeing women coming on board with aspects like financial literacy, that's something that we're working on in communities. How can they expand, also literacy, how can they expand their opportunities outside of the home? So really breaking molds and barriers. And one of the aspects that I have to say really hit me hard is when I've surveyed thousands of fishers around the world. And the one question I have for them, and they're almost all male, I say, what would you like your children to do? What profession would you like them to do? There is not a single one that has said, I would like my child to be a fisher.
Oh, really?
They know how hard this sector is. They can see the writing on the wall. Climate change is not making anything any easier. Fish are changing their distributional patterns. There's less prey available for them. Pollution and so much more is really shifting and changing fisheries. So one of the things that they say is, please, could you help build the capacities of our children, and especially our daughters? And one of the things that has come out of the work that we've done together is that many of the fishers we work with are sending us their daughters, because all of my leadership, almost all of my leadership and my scientists are women. And so they've seen these positive role models that they want their daughters to follow. And so you're seeing this shift in mindset and everything. It's a wonderful thing to behold.
Yeah. And I think it shows, like, throughout the whole of today, we've heard how important role models, like wherever you are in the world, unless you have the role models, you just can't. It's very hard to imagine something, isn't it? You need that to, like, cling on to. So that sounds like that's similar.
And they're even excited about their daughters actually handling and working with sharks. So that's a really big mindset change.
Yeah, we were saying earlier about the kind of keynote and kind of embracing the fear.
Yes.
And that's kind of almost the ultimate of that. And Henrik, I know that the HX Foundation does some work with MarAlliance, and I wondered from your perspective, like, what have you noticed in choosing kind of which projects to work with or communities to work with when you and the conservation projects involve more women leaders? What have you noticed some of the outcomes being?
So let me give you two concrete examples. So one of the organizations that we are supporting is the Galapagos Conservancy on Galapagos. And they really saw that they were struggling with a lot of the community engagement. So what their answer was that they created a special program for sustainable entrepreneurship for women, where they were giving out grants, training, mentorships to women-led businesses. And it's one of the projects we've supported with them because we see that the real impact it's doing on the ground. Because these women-led businesses are making a bigger change to the communities than the male-led ones. It's just the reality of the fact. They are much more inclusive. They're much more looking about how this business can give back. How can they engage the whole community? What benefits can this business create for the Galapagos Islands? Not just what's my revenue bottom line and how much money am I going to make and how much of a bigger house or a bigger car is that going to make me be able to afford. So that's one of the ways we've tried to make a difference. Another one, which is a little bit more extreme, quite literally, is that we are supporting a Lilith who is doing a solo polar expedition next Antarctica season. 1,130 kilometers on the Antarctic ice, so it's 50 days with an 85-kilo sled to do climate research.
Wow. Blimey.
I couldn't do that from here to Tottenham Court Road. And we're supporting female scientists like her and expeditionists because it's about a mindset shift. You know, it's about showing who can lead an expedition, who can be our chief scientist, who can be at the forefront of this. And if we're not supporting them, how are they going to rise up? So I think that's another way that it's really important that everybody in this room are really opening those doors and making them big and wide, because that's how we can make a difference.
Yeah, and I think, Sally, yeah, you go.
No, it's good.
Did you want to go?
I was just going to pick up on that, and I think this is a really important point that a few of us have had conversations on here today, that we should talk about the changes we need to make and the training and support we need to provide. But it's really important also to remember that there is a vast amount of knowledge, expertise and brilliance that's just overlooked and ignored. There's so much incredible understanding of how to address issues at the local level. And we do have a really big challenge ahead of us because, again, we are not going to solve biodiversity crisis, climate change without that knowledge. These are big global issues, but they play out at the local level in so many regards. And so what we need to be thinking about is how we identify that knowledge, how we provide support, how we escalate, how we amplify, and how we raise awareness and we share that information. There's sort of this quite difficult sort of place between these massive global systems issues, and ultimately the solutions are at the grassroots and in the vast majority in the knowledge of women who are managing local resources. That are often the first to see changes happening and to flag them up and to raise them. You know, there are incredible women in Colombia who are raising the flag around water pollution and environmental justice and are actually being persecuted for it. Or, you know, beekeepers in China, women who are again doing amazing work to promote beekeeping and that sort of vital income streams, and again are really kind of being very challenged by those political headwinds. And so I think there's just something around that we should all just be keeping in mind, that as well as creating new opportunities and ideas, there's also a heck of a lot out there that exists that we need to both link up and leverage whatever platforms we have to raise awareness.
Yeah, totally. And I think going back to what Julia Simpson was saying earlier, that she's kind of learned how to, like, you know, the reality is the system is male, it's data-led, it doesn't respond as quickly or as well to the more abstract, nebulous, like the things that are like intersectionality, the more complex issues. And I wonder whether, like, do we need to start, is it our responsibility to get some really hard data on some of this? I don't know whether Henrik and Rachel, from your perspective, like, from a reporting point of view, if we had the data to say, actually, we found out that when we give money to women leading conservation projects on the ground, that actually the impact is like X% more, or the ripple effect within the community is bigger. Is that something that you would ever kind of report on with actual kind of real data?
Well, I don't know. As a funder, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and then I've got a couple of thoughts on that.
We haven't reported the data on it, but we see we get the impact reporting on the projects that we fund. So it's really hard to say we didn't fund this, so we know how. So it's really tricky to then get the impact of something you didn't fund.
Yeah.
But what I can say with confidence is that if I line up all the projects we have done that are male-led compared to all the projects we've done that are women-led, there is a difference.
Yay.
Right?
That's the answer I wanted.
Right? There is a difference, and there is more impact on the ground for a bigger part of the community from the women-led projects. Right? There is. And I mean, this is, and also when you aggregate the data, you will see the same. It's because they're not primarily doing this business to buy a bigger car and a bigger house. Right? Yeah. They're doing it for, you know, yes, they're great entrepreneurs. That is necessary for it to for the business to actually succeed. But it's what you do with that bottom line, and it's how you think about the business as part of the community rather than your private vehicle for success. That's the big difference.
I was just going to add to that, and I completely agree. The number of shiny Hiluxes driven around Central America running big multi-million-dollar projects with limited impact. I have seen this over the last 3 decades. Yes. But what I was going to say, I think we have superpowers as women in the conservation and the science space that also touches on what you said, which is there is all of this amazing fount of traditional knowledge. So some of the things that we do really well is we listen and we ask questions and we convene and we're willing to park our egos at the door. And because of that, we tend to have more demand-driven projects. The majority of our work is demand-driven. People come to us and they say, look, we've noticed X and Y. We're very concerned. Let's work together. And then we collaborate to try and find the solutions. And then we help as bridges to bring those to policymakers or managers whom the communities do not always have access to, or donors or others. So I think those are some of our superpowers that do actually feed into why we do have a lot of more success at the ground level. And I want to highlight how unusual and how special, Felicia, you and your team are. I've worked with enforcement groups in many countries, in Africa, Oceania, Latin America. None are women, and definitely not women-led. And I know that if we had black mambas of the sea, we would do really, really well in MPA enforcement.
Yeah, I think, and that's come up earlier as well, hasn't it, around listening. And I think there's something quite interesting about when women seem to go into leadership positions, it tends to be in response to a problem that needs to be solved. Whereas often well, I'm not going to say the opposite, but let's just say that's when women often step up, and we've heard that a lot today. So around kind of this interim position. So Zena talking about you would go into a position that you felt was above you when someone was asking you to, because essentially you were responding to their need, and then you realised, actually, I can own this, I've got it. And we were talking a little bit about that as well, weren't we? And before we got on stage today, we had a really interesting discussion where I was saying, I found this crazy stat where 60% of C-suite sustainability officers are women, which is obviously way higher than anyone else in a C-suite position. And we were kind of saying, why is that? Is that, yeah, is that good, or is that actually worrying? Like, where are the men? Henrik said straight away, where are the men? So I kind of wanted you to talk to all of you today a little bit about that as well, around kind of the role of female leaders. Why are women stepping up into these sustainability roles? And in certain places, like maybe more in the global south where we haven't got as many female leaders, how do we get more in there? Sally, do you want to kick off from your perspective, or maybe share how you ended up in a leadership role?
I'm smiling because we chatted about this before. And,
not at all set up.
No. I appreciate the space. So I'll share a story which I have never shared in public before, but thanks to this being obviously a very sort of open space. So I actually came accidentally into travel anyway. I was absolutely outraged to discover the kind of economic leakage in travel and how little money actually reaches destinations, which was what sort of led me into this sort of accidental career path. And through that, I ended up meeting Prince Harry and found out he had very similar, passion, and he'd worked a lot in sub-Saharan Africa in conservation and seen the impact on the ground. And we developed this concept of Travalyst, and I was always sort of supporting in a bit in the background. And they needed a CEO, and he asked me if I would be interested in doing the job, and I said, well, I can't. I have a baby. I live in the Lake District, I'm not even in London, and we're in the middle of COVID, this will be impossible. And he said, okay, so you've told me all the reasons why it's not possible. Can we talk about how we can make it possible? And I said, sure, well, but it's not going to be possible. This is not how chief executive roles work. And he's like, again, stop telling me, just let's talk about how we can actually make this feasible. And so I was like, well, you'll say no, but I need to work really limited hours, total flexibility. I want to do extended breastfeeding, so I'm going to need to have my baby around. He was like, fine, anything else? I was like, I don't know. And he was like, none of these are problems. We should just create an organization that supports that. So I was like, well, I'll give it 3 months and I'll see, because I know you're struggling to find this role, so I'll step in. And that was 6 years ago. And we've built an organization that now is majority, 90% women, and majority women throughout all levels. Our board is majority women. But interestingly, it's all been made possible by two incredible male allies, by both the Duke, but also by Gianni Marostica, who's our current board chair, formerly actually of Google. And it was really interesting that actually, in my experience, I was creating the obstacles mainly because I'd been socialized to see that there weren't these role models and these kind of positions, and it couldn't be done in a way that was authentic to me. And it actually took Prince Harry to challenge me on that and to enable me to also build an organization that now, you know, caring responsibilities are front and center in our values and the way that we run the organization. We have absolute flexibility for parents or for people with any sorts of, you know, outside of work life that happens, right? So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey in that regard.
And thank you so much for sharing, because I do think the more we all hear
Thank you. Thank you. One day, I will share a photo that my husband took of me breastfeeding a kind of an older baby on a call with the European Commission with the video off. One day I'll be brave enough to share.
Henrik, anything you want to add to that as our kind of ally on the panel?
So I think we first have to recognize that it's really valuable that we have so many women CSOs, Chief Sustainability Officers, but we also need more Sallys, right? We need more CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, where a lot of the real power and budget lies. So I think that's incredibly important. You probably saw that I brought my 2.5-year-old daughter today. I'm getting emotional about it because it's our first trip together. Her future should be based on her competence, not her chromosomes. So, and I think that that's incredibly important. Right? That's what real allyship is about, realizing that, being Prince Harry, really, really enabling the next generation be CEOs and creating a ton of Sallys, because we need them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henrik. And I was asking Henrik why he thought this was. Why are there more women in these sustainability roles? And he straight away said it's because the pay is not as good.
Well, did you know in the US, so the average pay for a CFO in the US is about $350,000, and for a CSO, which is primarily, as you say, women, a third of that. A third of that. And again, women are like, you know, why are you doing this job? Because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
You're so right, Henrik.
And it's answering a need. Brilliant. So, Felicia, I feel like you and the Black Mambas are the ultimate kind of role models when it comes to female leaders in conservation. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit, within your community, why do you think that's so important to be that role model and show the rest of your community strong female leaders?
As we are the conservers of the wildlife, I think showing up in the community what we are capable of doing, because women back in the days was meant that they must babysit and be wives doing house chores. So with all the stereotypes in the job that we are doing, we're able to break the stereotypes. I myself, yes, I was put down by the voices of people coming from men saying that, what is she doing in the bush without a gun? Just uniform and lipstick and gold earrings. Because they believe that women should bear children, women should do household things, women should go fetch water. Growing in a black community where a field ranger was for men, because you cannot get inside the reserve without an AK-47. You cannot get inside the reserve without all the muscles. But I've proved my community and I've proved the world, because I've break that stereotype by putting my uniform and get inside the bush and proved myself that I'm capable of doing the same job that was meant to be for men. I'm here today. I've been doing the job for 12 years.
Amazing. Thank you. And I think in, you know, Henrik, thinking about your kind of 2-year-old, you know, and everyone in the room who works in tourism, tourism is an incredible vehicle to kind of get all these role models in front of so many people. Kind of, if she went out on a trip with Intrepid and met the Black Mambas, like what an inspiring, wow, I really can do anything. And often when we travel from the global north to the global south, we're also seeing women that have done things with so much more holding them back than we have now. So I think that's something that we could all remember. We were chatting a little bit earlier about kind of resilience as well, and I think it's really important to think about we need solutions to kind of solve climate and the biodiversity crisis, but also to help us all be more resilient to a changing world that we have to face is happening. And one thing that really surprised me at an event recently was a lady from Kenya talking about how they've worked out that the women in their community is like the kind of early warning sign for climate crisis. They're the ones that know when the wells dried up. They're the ones that notice when the food patterns are changing. They're the ones that start to realise that actually the weather has impacted the kids' education. And I wondered for any of you, like what's really kind of surprised you in your work when thinking about the links between gender and climate or conservation, or when you get women involved in this work? Is there anything that's particularly surprised you? Rachel, do you want to start?
I think what I've found really surprising with gender and climate is very much that they're kind of on the forefront of seeing what's going to happen, but they're also the ones who convene the communities and push for change. So in so many communities that we've worked in, you often get the chairperson is a woman. She is driving kind of the roadmap for the community. And in fact, we're actually undertaking a resiliency study at the moment, dovetailing climate change as well, and pandemics. Because what we witnessed with COVID is not the last time that we'll have a pandemic, that's for sure. So how do these communities, how do these women actually, how do they become more resilient? And so I'd say that one of the key things is the fact that they're able to build that roadmap, to drive that change in their communities. And that's what I've seen across multiple fishing communities, across multiple countries. So where we come in a lot of the time is, what skills would you like to have to better create that roadmap, to better drive that change, to better convene people, and much more. Because a lot of the time they don't have a lot of the skills that are required. They have the vision, they have the desire, but not necessarily the skills.
So yeah, Henrik, do you want to add to that?
I just wanted to build on that on one point, because when us as foundations or other externals come in to fund projects in these areas, it's incredibly, it's maybe what surprised me the most is how true the stereotypes are. So you will see them all go to ask the men first, what do you need? The men will be the first to be invited in the room, and the men will be the first that they start funding. So I think that's another where we just have to completely change our mindset on how do we approach philanthropy in these areas. Where do we go in and fund things, and how do we approach these communities? Because I see so many times that the approach is really sort of, they're falling back to those old stereotypes.
Yeah. Felicia, do you have anything to kind of add to that? Anything particular that surprised you in your work? When it's kind of going to community, or even kind of talking to the tourism industry or the media, any surprising reactions when they come across the Black Mambas? Or
actually, I'm surprised with the rangers, the women in the rangers field that are working as field rangers, with all the stereotypes, but sometimes when we have people to visit the Black Mambas in our headquarters, some are journalists, some are coming to a film, but they will always ask you the question, why women? Yes, they always ask that question, why women? And then I simply say that women are caregivers, and women are often on the front line of the community conservation initiative. They bring experiences and parking. I forgot it.
Like hospitality, yeah. They like host people and
on the table. So women are important in conservation.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's really, I hope that we in the tourism industry have like thousands of Black Mamba type projects all around the world that we can take more people to see, because I think it's an incredible opportunity. Okay, I would love to leave everyone here with some practical advice to go away with, myself included. So I wondered if you could, to wrap up, if you could just share with the audience kind of top tips. So if there's any business or organisation in the room looking to maybe really think about how they better link this gender and female empowerment issue with climate, sustainability, conservation work, what would your top tips be? Sally, do you want to start?
Sure. I think don't leave it to be an afterthought. Quite often these things come way down the line at the start. Take a big look at that holistic picture, of course, then think about like where you particularly need to focus. But, you know, make sure there's that interconnectedness between the issues. And I think, you know, from our experience as well, make sure that that filters out through how the organisation is structured. You know, Intrepid is an amazing example of this, right? The way it's baked into your, you know, the cultural DNA of your organisation, that will show up in every piece of work that you do. And I think the other piece that has been said, and I think bears really repeating, is to leave egos at the door and to listen and learn. The thing that's surprised me is just how much unbelievable knowledge there is out there, often in Indigenous communities. We just need to go to the effort to ask the right questions, to listen to the answers, and then to be able to convene those safe spaces that allow for and ensure that those voices are being heard. I think that's something that everybody can be thinking about how it relates to their organisation. And the final just thing I'd say was, is this meant to be one thing? Sorry.
No.
Maybe I should stop.
No, go for it.
I feel so inspired by what these guys are all doing. I think it just struck me from some of the panels this morning. It can be really overwhelming, right? These are such big challenges and they're intergenerational. Don't forget that one size doesn't fit all. There's a lot of information, but you can take the bits that are most authentically resonating with you and work out where your particular areas that you can focus and where your superpower is. Every one of us has so much power. We just often tell ourselves that we don't, or we allow society to tell us that we don't. So there isn't a one size fits all. I think that's so important. Take all the information, but then find the right fit for your particular organisation, role or work.
Yeah, love that. Thank you, Sally. That's brilliant. Rachel?
All that and more. What I did want to say is I see a lot of parachute science and parachute travel. So people who don't even know about the country, and they'll fly in, they'll run everything, and then they're out again. And there's a loss of such a great opportunity to build the capacities locally, to be able to run those travels and to build that collaboration and to tap into all this incredible local knowledge that enriches not only the collaboration, but the people who come and visit. We all know our travelers. I run bespoke small expeditions inside of MarAlliance in order to fund our fishing community collaborations and our monitoring work. So I know firsthand people are looking for that special connection with people and nature. So think about how you can instill capacities. Either it's bringing people to a place to build their capacity as outside so that they're even more effective as guides or travel tour operators or more. Even something as simple as, and I hate to say this because it sounds so damn neo-colonialist, but learning English. Because it opens more doors and it makes a lot more of the industries available and so much more. And the other one that I was going to suggest, it's thanks to many organizations, travel organizations and more, 1% for the planet, etc. Think about, I love that word, baking in. Think about baking in a percentage into your trips and tours that goes back to specific projects that you're taking your people to see. Black Mambas. I'm sure you could use more general operating support because everybody can. We all function on shoestrings. So think about baking that in and ensuring that there's more GOS for these community-based organizations or NGOs and more.
And the great news is when you send funding to female-led conservation initiatives, you're also getting a community impact for free.
Yep.
So, okay, thanks, Rachel. Henrik.
I think, first of all, don't treat gender equity as a compliance exercise. Make it core to your strategy. This isn't about ticking some ESG box because you need some reporting, right? Make it part of your business model. Make it something where you're really turning your guests, your travelers, into advocates, into ambassadors, right? We're not primarily doing this for our ESG report. We're doing it because it has impact, because it makes a difference to these incredible places that we are so fortunate to visit. So make it part of your core strategy. Secondly, I think it's really important that we have to seek out the voices that aren't always the loudest. Right? The communities and individuals that need support and that need us the most are really never the loudest. So we have to go beyond the obvious. We have to be proactive. We have to go out and find them. Right? We have to invest time in finding the right people wherever we are operating. It really makes a difference, right? It's really where the untapped potential lies. Sally talked about how many great things we have already, but so many of them are not able to get their work done because they're not getting the support, because they're not the loudest. And finally, I think we've talked about it a lot. Make leadership accountable from the top down. Right? This is not something that should lie only with your chief sustainability officer or your sustainability team. The chair of your board should have this top of mind. Your CEO, your CFO, everybody in the C-suite, this should be top of mind and they should be made accountable for it.
Brilliant, thanks, Henrik. Felicia, what are your top tips?
Building paths for all genders for people to be able to contribute their talent and skills to the bigger picture. The second one, develop your staff, invest into them so that they can grow further. Marriage should be a benchmark among all genders. We are all here to complement each other and work together and not against each other. Thanks.
Love that. Brilliant. Well, what a way to wrap up. Thank you.
Could you please stay here? That was just fabulous. I love. We've got the Black Mambas of the Sea happening, which I can't wait for that. Baking in, absolutely. I thought that was brilliant. I mean, it really hit home that women are 14 times more likely to die in a crisis disaster. My God, that really, really hit home. Henrik, your passion and drive and action. Talk about somebody really taking action and support. And I love that when you got emotional about your daughter. You should. And she's going to be amazing. I can see that. Absolutely. And I thought, to say, why rely on 50% of the population to solve it who are the same 50% that caused it? That made me chuckle, actually. So that, but really, really powerful. So we're coming over to Slido. We're coming back to all of you, and that's why the panel stay here. We do what we did last time. And the first question coming up on Slido is, do you believe, no it's not, it's who should play the leading role in advancing gender-inclusive conservation and climate resilience? Who should play the leading role in advising gender-inclusive conservation and climate resilience? That's what they do in game shows, and that's what I'm trying to do now. Please pop that in, and let's see where we're coming up. So we have here governments and policymakers. Oh, God, if we just rely on them, I'm not sure where we're going to get to, but hey-ho. And we also have here local communities and Indigenous leaders. We've got private tourism businesses, NGOs and international agencies, travellers and consumers. Okay, so it is governments and policymakers right at the top. Okay, I'm going to it'd be great to get some feedback. I can understand that, but if we rely on that, where are we going to get to?
Yeah. It's going to be a bit too slow, I think. Isn't it?
Right, so Rachel, yeah.
So my adopted country is Belize.
Right.
And we hardly have any women in positions of power
Right.
as the policymakers and the politicians in our government.
Right.
And so I think that it's a lot more demand-driven, and especially people who visit. 1 in 4 people is involved in tourism in Belize.
Yeah.
And so tourists and travelers can make a huge difference in demanding change.
Yeah.
They will listen to that.
Good point. Any other points on the panel? We just changed the clock to the new Slido time frame, so I can just, thanks very much. Any other thoughts, Henrik? Anything from your side?
I think I think you're quite right that if we rely on governments, it's going to happen sometime in 2247. And that we don't have time for that.
Right.
Right? But we do need the governments to create the framework for all of these others to actually be able to make a difference. Right? They have to create the conduit. But then we need Sally, we need Rachel, we need Felicia, we need all of you in the room to participate and be leaders and work within that framework that the government and the policymakers are creating.
And with all of your experience between you, which government or which country do you think is doing it best today?
Iceland.
And anybody in the audience? Iceland? Just anybody? Yes. Can we just, thank you. Yeah, no, because then everybody else can't hear, so that's great. Yeah. Just keep singing and we'll get there.
So it's a bit of a, I don't know who's doing it best, but I do know a story which I think is really pertinent in this, because it's a real discussion. Like, the question is who should play the leading role.
Yeah.
It's not who is going to.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's about the question that you've asked. So that's why I think most people have answered that, because who ought to? Of course the government ought to. Are they going to? Hell no. They're not going to. Who's going to have to do it is the second one. So that's the question is the problem with the answer, right?
Yeah.
That the second thing is what country is doing an amazing job at this. You've got to look again about purchasing power and who is actually making the decisions in communities and how that's affecting communities. Straight away into my head have popped 2 countries, India and Guatemala. Now, India has banned plastic bags in many states. Women do the shopping, they go and pick up the plastic bags, they buy stuff in them, and then they bring them home. There's nowhere to dispose of them because there's no waste disposal. Everything clogs up with plastic bags, disaster. India banned the plastic bags. Guatemala sells everything in plastic bags. Now, if you're in Belize, you know what has happened from Guatemala and what Guatemala has done to Belize. They tip everything in the rivers because there's no rubbish collection at all. So the infrastructure problem is that the Guatemalan government, presumably there's some guy, I'm assuming it's a guy, it might be a woman, has a plastic bag making business in government, does not want to ban plastic bags. So everything you buy, everything you do in Guatemala is wrapped in plastic. There is no rubbish collection in the country. There's no systematic rubbish collection. Everyone suffers. And that is a gender-driven problem because all the shopping is done by the women and they don't have any other bags because there's only plastic bags on offer. So that's 2 really interesting things where policy and gender have clashed in a great way in 2 different places in the world.
Interesting.
Joe, can I just...
Yeah, sure.
I was just going to add that I think that 2 really powerful things that came out of today is like the superpower of women is often listening and convening. And that actually, if we could somehow listen and convene to all these groups and get them vaguely working together, like that's often what the solution is about. And like, obviously that's what Travalyst does. And
well, no, I was going to say the exact same. It's got to be multi-stakeholder collaboration. That's why we've seen more progress at COP, right, in the last couple of years, thanks to the likes of you in tourism and WTTC convening all of these groups, because you can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, I think this is where it comes into play for travellers at the destination level. One of the things we have to to always remind ourselves, and Prince Harry says more than anything else, is without destinations, we have no travel. So kind of all of these things are business imperative for us to not have beautiful shorelines and rivers clogged up with plastics, like, because that's going to mean that our businesses die because people don't want to go to those places. And it's all, again, it's all this system level. And as we know, we were talking about earlier, destinations often have a very strong, DMOs have a very strong governmental link. And so I think it is about kind of syncing up. There won't be, I don't think there's one leader in any one setting. All parties have to, it's got to be cross-sector collaboration, but in each scenario, there might be, you know, a particularly forward-thinking government. There are some phenomenal DMOs in the Netherlands, for example. Or it might be that actually there's this wonderful opportunity for local voices, quite rightly, to be leading, as we say, should always be the case. But I think it comes together, that multi-stakeholder piece, at the destination level like nothing else.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. No. This is you know, this is great. Okay, so let's move on to question number 2 now. Do you believe tourism can meaningfully contribute to gender-inclusive climate resilience? So, do you believe that tourism can meaningfully contribute to gender-inclusive climate resilience? Yes, its efforts are community-led and inclusive. No, tourism often harms more than helps. Possibly, but depends on how it's done. Not sure. So a few minutes on that. Sort of yes, its efforts, effects on the community, community-led and inclusive is at the top of that one. Possibly depends on how it's done. Seems to be growing. And again, I've just come to the panel on that, and anybody in the audience, if you want to ask questions or comments, just to get your thoughts on the feedback here, and any ideas that you might, thoughts that you might have.
I think because women, it's often women working in travel and tourism. Sadly, not all the way up necessarily, and so when there's a climate, so thinking of something like the Valencia floods, you know, it will have been women working in the tourism industry. Women in those communities would have probably been the first ones for the tourism industry to really notice how kind of huge a disaster that was for them. So I think there's this link between, it's kind of workforce based. So it's like the women having to be resilient within their communities who also happen to be working in the hospitality and tourism industry. And so somehow if we can kind of listen more to those voices to understand how can we as an industry support our workforce, which is primarily women, to be more resilient in a climate disaster, then that's going to probably have a knock-on effect for the rest of their community. So maybe in a way, tourism can act as a bit of a catalyst to support women to be more resilient. Sorry, that was very long-winded, but hopefully it made vague sense.
Yeah, no. So any other thoughts, Rachel? Yeah,
just a quick thought, and it's really down to distribution of benefits. And what I've seen is, and maybe this is unpopular with some, but mass tourism, unfortunately, you're going to see a very, very poor distribution of benefits. And that, again, is going to impact women more than men. So we're always trying to suggest that overnight tourism be preferred over mass, big, huge cruise ships and that kind of tourism, because it just doesn't benefit communities, it doesn't benefit nature, and ultimately doesn't benefit women.
I'm glad I'm not still representing a cruise line. Great, excellent, good. Okay.
Sorry.
Any questions or thoughts or comments from the... Yes, hang on, we'll get a microphone to you. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. When you were talking about how true are the stereotypes, I'm referring to the men on the panel. And I'm talking about, yes, it's true. Sometimes it happens that only men are invited from the community, but sometimes we don't know sometimes the kind of power dynamics that are internal to the community. So there is a universe that we don't know over there. So they might need to be invited because they are the representative, officially and formally. Community had their own leadership, and there are dynamics as well, political dynamics. There is a lot of imbalances in there. so we had to consider something we don't know. So how we should ask a question: how can we work better with communities? How can we learn, understand first, and comes from what we know about them and what we don't know, because it's another universe. Sometimes we don't know everything. So I just a comment, because I understand where you're coming from, and I know because I work in both directions. I work a lot with communities as well, and I know, I realize the stereotypes exist from the external, but also there are a lot of stereotypes that live in the community themselves, about themselves and about the way they relate with the rest. So these include gender, not only though. So, but anyway, this is just a food for thoughts, and I'm happy to continue the conversation later on. But there are a lot of realities that we don't have access to, and how can we make them part of a conversation, knowing that what they think about themselves, including women, and what exists there in terms of power dynamics, etc.
But just, Henrik, do you want to make a comment?
If I can just
please,
say one thing. One of the ways that we can make a difference is by hiring them. So our expedition product manager on Greenland is Lali. She's from Greenland. She's born and raised there, and she knows the community better than anybody else, right? And she's amazing. She's really revolutionized our Greenlandic product. But we need to hire them. That's one of the reasons how we can break those stereotypes.
I think we also need data, don't we, as well? This is something, obviously, that we think this is kind of what we do. We convene people to collect and share data at a scale that's never been available, including actually with policymakers who say we often have really good intentions, but great bureaucracy and no data to help focus efforts. And so Travalyst is developing this quite significant initiative, sort of at the intersection of all different operators in travel, to help to essentially unlock the flow of data. And it's really interesting to us because even though environmental impact is so often the focus, it's so much more known. Like social metrics, we're just light years behind, especially in tourism compared to other sectors. But happily, last year we acquired Weaver, who a few folks might know, the amazing Julie Cheetham and their team, who are now all part of Travalyst, to my great joy. And this is entirely their background, and Julie has the bit between her teeth with how we start to now collect far more of this social data, and not just, we talked earlier about quantitative data, really important to start actually collecting what percentage of jobs are going to women, what are the growth opportunities in those roles, where's the pay split, but also qualitative information. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Do you feel that this is an industry that's supporting you? We're really excited by the opportunity to start gathering that data at scale and on a destination level, be able to share that so we can understand how is a particular locale doing in, across all these metrics. But there are no standards for this globally. It's quite crazy.
Interesting. And Felicia, can I just ask you, what transformation have you seen in your community from the men as they've seen what the Black Mambas have done? So have you seen the converts happen, and how's that taken place?
Ever since the Black Mambas were deployed in the reserve, men now have seen that the Black women are capable of doing the job that they were stereotypes on and maybe undermining them, but because of they now see the impact that we have in conservation, and also we're capable of doing that job so very well like them, they've now gained respect for us. They respect us and respect our job.
Great. Positive action, you see.
Yes.
Positive action. Brilliant. Yes, Zina?
I want to make a quick comment.
Sure.
Something that Felicia forgot to mention, I don't know if that's her humility, but since the Black Mamba were deployed in the Kruger National Park, no rhinos have been killed.
Yeah.
Wow.
She hasn't said that. But the reason why I think it's important, is because when I went to Southern Africa, I visited them, obviously, but I also went around, and I went to Botswana, to a national park that you may know called Chobe. And Chobe is actually, unfortunately, known as a place where you can't see the big five because there's no more rhinos there. So if you think about the work that they're doing, and if we could replicate that work to all of those places, we would protect the nature and our wildlife in a way that's, no other way we can do, in fact. So their work is amazing. The fact that you're getting respect from the community should get more than respect. You're doing a job that others are not doing. Yeah. So really well done to you. I just wanted to mention that.
Amazing. 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 What a fabulous note to end on. So a big thank you to our panellists. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Feel free to stay. So we are taking a break again, apparently. And we are going to have some tea and cake and more crisps, I think. But come back for this afternoon session on the dot at 2:59. 2:59, and then we're moving into the final leg of what's going to be an incredible panel.
Oh, yeah.
Great speech, so please come back just before 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you. Excuse me, everybody, we are starting again. Thank you. Thank you, we are starting again. Hello, hello, hello. We are starting again, please. Alessandra, we're starting. Thank you, thank you.
Please make your way to your seats. Please make your way to your seats. Thank you.
Okay.